if you bought a GLA brand new, this next bit could be a bit upsetting. This is nice, but it just, I don't know, does it feel a bit cheap to you?
I predict in a few years' time, these things are going to be cheap, like very cheap. But you know what they say, there's nothing more expensive than a cheap Mercedes.
I hate to say it, but at normal speeds, it just doesn't feel that special. Okay, what happens when you try to be everything to everyone all of the time? You generally fail, right? Well, can that be the case for the Mercedes-Benz GLA, especially in AMG, guys? The GLA is attempting to both be an SUV and a hatchback. It's trying to offer a young, sporty image while retaining the class and sophistication that Mercedes are renowned for. And with the AMG power plant, this sensible crossover can apparently embarrass all but the fastest supercars. So can the GLA nail all of these objectives, or is this thing just a recipe for disaster? I mean, now that these are populating the used car market, what actually goes wrong with them? How about we start with the exterior? Okay, first up, owners have reported that the fuel filler flap can get stuck closed and not open like this. Now, the good news is it's generally fixed under warranty because it's just a simple actuator issue, but it's not so handy if you're desperate for fuel. Now, there is a manual release to get this thing to open, but it can be a massive faff to actually do. Just check the owners groups and forums for tutorials on how to do it. However, do not force it open, because some owners that have done this have actually broken it and then you've got to replace it. It can be a massive pain in the ass. Okay, next up, the rear view camera. It sort of flips down and up. The problem with this is some owners have complained it can be really noisy, but the problem with that is if you're in traffic or just driving around town, the car might sense or think that you're about to park, so it flips the camera down, and then when it realizes you're not parking, it flips it back up. But for some people on their way to work, this can happen countless times, and with it flapping open and closed all the time, it can sound like something's rattling around in your boot. Now, frustratingly, when some owners have complained about this noisy camera to their dealerships, the dealerships have replied with the fact that this is just normal operation for the car. And if anything, the noisiness of it is almost a safety feature of the car. We call bullshit on that. Also with the cameras, and Bruce that owns this car has had this problem, plenty of owners have had issues where the camera just works inconsistently. Most of the time it works, but then sometimes it doesn't. Now, this could allude to more electronic gremlins, but we'll elaborate on that in a moment. Next up, we come to the sunroof, which is really clever because when it's open, it can adjust to 3 different angles to try to reduce the amount of wind noise it makes. However, this just adds complexity to the entire arrangement, and with complexity can come issues, and my God, haven't some owners had some issues with this thing? Now, one of the biggest problems with this is that apparently if the sunroof is even slightly out of alignment, it can actually damage the rails that the sunroof slides on, and to a point where sometimes those sunroof rails, they need to be replaced. Also, and look, this is not exclusive to Mercedes or even the GLA, any car with a sunroof can be guilty of this. If the drainage channels get clogged at all, water can build up. That means water can get inside the car, and that means it increases the potential for electronic gremlins. So please, please make sure that all the drainage channels are cleared all the time. But back to issues with the sunroof exclusive to the GLA. One owner that we spoke to online mentioned that if she'd known that her car was going to spend more than 30% of its first 6 months of life sitting in a dealership trying to get the sunroof fixed up and actually working properly, she wouldn't have bought the car in the first place. Plus, speaking of dealerships, another owner that we spoke to that had sunroof issues mentioned that the dealership she went to, they fixed the sunroof problem, no dramas, but then the problem was they left dirty handprints on the top of the roof liner. All the interior A-pillar trim sections weren't attached properly again, they were out of alignment, and the entire car was just rattling like crazy after they'd fixed the sunroof. And look, obviously not every single Mercedes dealership is going to mistreat your car like this. There are some really great dealerships out there. Our tip here is just to do your homework on the owners groups and the forums and find out who the good and bad guys are. Now, next up, some owners have had to replace their tail lights multiple times because condensation can build up in them. Now, these owners have been told that there is an update coming, although they've been told this since 2020, and apparently the problem still occurs. Okay, next up, make sure that everything that's powered by electricity on the exterior actually works, because owners have reported just a huge range of different electronic gremlins. Now, sometimes this can be just the sign of a dying battery, but other times it can just be a mysterious and insidious issue that no one can seem to solve. We're talking about things like power folding mirror issues, problems where the windows refuse to go up and down or they just sort of stop halfway until you reset the car, keyless entry and door locking problems, even phantom warnings. So some owners have had a problem where you'll get a warning on the dash saying that you've got low coolant, but then you check the car and the coolant's fine. Now these phantom warnings can also happen while you're driving. Plenty of owners have complained that the car will just throw up a bunch of warnings at you and sometimes even stop itself with the autonomous emergency braking, thinking that there's a car or an object in front of you, when there isn't. Now these phantom warnings often are fixed with just a software update, but there are unfortunate owners out there that have had the software update done, but then the problem comes back again, and they've stated that they've lost all confidence in driving the car because it could only be a matter of time until someone rear ends you because your car just stops suddenly. Now look, we understand that this video, it might give you the impression that the GLA is just a nightmare of reliability problems waiting to happen at any moment, but that is simply not the case. Not every GLA is going to have these problems. In fact, you'd like to think that the vast majority out there will have totally trouble-free existences. However, some of them just aren't that lucky. In fact, when we researched through owners groups and forums, there are countless stories of impeccable ownership experiences, many claiming that the overall build quality of this generation GLA is a massive improvement over the previous generation. However, some other owners have claimed that Mercedes-Benz quality control and build quality has just been on a slippery slope downwards for quite some time now. And they also claim that, in a way, some of the dealerships maybe even admit to this. A number of owners mentioned across the forums and owners groups that when they've taken their GLA back and complained about whatever issue, the dealerships have gone as far as to remind owners that the GLA is no C-Class or E-Class, so therefore the quality will be of a lower standard, and owners should expect that. I'm sorry, but if the car isn't up to Mercedes-Benz standards, it shouldn't be wearing the badge. Now, there has been a mid-cycle update in 2024, and we've got to say that the reports of common issues and problems, they do seem to be massively less than the pre-update cars. But in saying that, it's also important to remember that this update only happened about 12 months ago, so will they have problems down the track? Only time will tell. Although, I did recently drive a brand spanking new EQA, which shares a whole bunch with this car, and I gotta say, it didn't feel like Mercedes-Benz standards to me, but we'll elaborate more on this when we get inside. Okay, next up, let's talk about pricing on the used market. But a quick warning, if you bought a GLA brand new, this next bit could be a bit upsetting. For example, let's take this exact car, a 2021 GLA 45S. Brand new in Australia, these things retailed for around about $115,000. On the used market now, it's going to be swapping hands for around about $80,000. That's a $35,000 drop in value in just 4 years. And remember, generally speaking, the AMG models retain their value better than the more consumer-focused range. For example, a base model, the GLA 200, they retailed for around about $60,000. These days, you can pick them up for about $30,000. So it's potentially lost half of its value. And before you start thinking, well, this means they're an absolute bargain on the used market, just be aware, this depreciation, it doesn't seem to slow down. For example, take a previous generation GLA 250, so pretty much the middle of the range. They were retailing for around about $60,000 when brand new. These days, you can pick them up for under $15,000. And remember, the costs don't end there. We are talking about a Mercedes-Benz, so what they're going to charge for certain parts could be extreme to say the least, especially with the AMG models. Even things like the consumables, say brake rotors and brake pads, even suspension components. What Mercedes will try to charge you for some of this stuff is honestly daylight robbery. Look, our hot tip here is to do your homework and check out the owners groups and forums and get their advice when it comes to aftermarket parts, because honestly, you can save a fortune with aftermarket parts. Often the parts will perform better than the OEM ones and they can last longer. And our other hot tip here when it comes to aftermarket parts, or really any car accessories, is to check out our mates at Automotive Superstore, because they carry over 400,000 different parts and accessories. We're talking performance parts, full drive accessories, dash cams, aftermarket speakers, car care products, you name it, they've got it. Plus, to make sure that you are getting the exact right parts for your car, all you've got to do is type in your rego to the website and it will filter down to everything that is going to be best suited to your car. Look, honestly, you are going to love them as much as we do. Click the link below to join over 500,000 other satisfied Aussie customers. They're bloody legends. But look, back to the GLA, and aside from the cost of depreciation and the cost of parts and maintenance, and the potential question marks regarding the build quality and reliability, we totally understand why you might be tempted because look at it. Look, this is one of the areas that Mercedes-Benz work their dark arts and have you ignoring some of the potential unfortunate realities of the car, because the entire image of it, the entire look of it, especially in GLA 45S form, it is so appealing. And also, before any of us go criticizing this entire genre of car for existing in the first place, because, you know, if you want a hot hatch, go buy a real hot hatch like the A45 that this is based on. And if you want an SUV, go buy a real SUV. You've got to remember, not everybody out there has great mobility. What I mean is that with the A45, the seats in that thing are so low to the ground. If you've got any mobility issues, that can be a real nightmare to get in and out of the thing, let alone if you've got kids and you're trying to drag your 15-kilogram toddler in and out of the thing all day. That's going to be torture for your back. But then with one of these, you get all of the driving dynamics of a serious hot hatch without any of the gymnastics required to get in and out of the thing. Now, what can go wrong with the interior? Well, first up, quite a few owners have had complaints regarding the HVAC or the air conditioning system. We're talking about everything from it smelling weird to odd vibration and rattle sounds coming from it, even through to it just not working as it should from new. On one AMG thread, we found that some GLA 45S owners have had this problem where the air conditioning works totally fine when you're driving normally, but as soon as you slow down to stop, so does the air conditioning. Now, a few dealerships have told customers that some of these air conditioning issues can be just to excess debris building up near the vents for the air conditioning system. However, guess what some of these dealerships have charged their customers to remove the leaves and debris? Sometimes over $200. I mean, you buy a Mercedes-Benz thinking it's going to be a premium ownership experience, and then the air conditioning doesn't work properly. Then you find out apparently it's the leaves and debris, and then they charge you over $200 just to get rid of some leaves. That's insane. Now, how's this for adding complexity to an incredibly simple operation? The digital clock. Plenty of owners have complained that this doesn't keep accurate time. Sometimes it's 10 minutes fast or slow, sometimes it can be hours fast and slow. Now, the problem here is apparently due to the fact that the clock, it gets its time from the car's GPS system, but if the GPS signal drops out, the clock just reverts back to whatever the time was before the dropout. So mankind invented timekeeping in, 1200 BC. A $40 Casio G-Shock will keep accurate time no matter what you throw at it, but a $115,000 Mercedes-Benz, apparently, sometimes not. And then we come to the infotainment system gremlins, but before we get into those, I've got to say, when this system works properly, it is fantastic. It's so intuitive to use. There's so much depth to it. Honestly, go delving into the sub-menus and you'll be amazed what you can find. Fantastic. I still think BMW's iDrive is superior to this, but not by much. Excellent system when it works. Now, the problems reported by owners range from Apple CarPlay and Android Auto just dropping out sporadically, or sometimes it can be a nightmare to reconnect them. There can be Bluetooth connection issues. Sometimes it can just be a simple software update that fixes it. Other times, some owners mention to us that when they start the car, they have to start it twice. One time to start the car, and then a second time to restart the car to reboot the infotainment system so it actually works correctly. Now, we do need to make something clear. This isn't necessarily exclusive to Mercedes-Benz or the GLA. It seems like every modern car that we feature of late, they all have some kind of infotainment system issue. It's just nice that when this one works properly, it's fantastic. Some of the other ones are crap. Also, it's great that on the post-update models, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto are finally wireless, because previously they weren't. Now, just like the exterior, please make sure that everything that's powered by electricity in here actually works. Press every button, try every mode. Does it actually work? Chances are it will, but some owners have not been that lucky. Look, it's fantastic that these things are loaded with so much tech and equipment, and for most owners, you'd like to think it will all work perfectly, but even for simple functions like the rain sensing wipers, just throw a bucket of water on the car before you buy it and make sure even they work. Also, do the wipers actually wipe, or do they just shudder and leave whole sections of windscreen unwiped? Because owners have complained that they can do that too. Plus, like so many manufacturers, what Mercedes-Benz might charge you for replacement wiper blades, honestly, it's daylight robbery. Now, to avoid all of these issues, just hit the Wipertech link below and get yourself a set of Wipertech wiper blades. Look, we love these guys. We've been working with them for a couple of years because not only do they offer incredible value, the wiper blades fit perfectly and they're super easy to fit. They're easy to order online. And if you order a set via the link below, you're going to get 15% off and free express shipping. They're a great Aussie company. We love them. So will you. Just don't be one of these and spend too much on replacement wiper blades. G'day, mate. Although, If, like Bruce that has lent us this car, you lend us your car to feature, and we feature it, you won't have to buy a set because we're going to give you a set for free as a thank you present. To volunteer your car, just simply message us on the socials or check out the email link down below. Anyway, next up we have the, let's say, the ergonomic complaints that some owners happen to have, especially if they drive at certain times of the daytime, because depending on how these interiors are spec'd, reflections can be a real issue. Now, this is a problem that even I had in the EQA that I drove recently. It shares pretty much exactly the same interior as this car, but the one I drove, this was spec'd to be a gloss finish, as with these, and honestly, in the afternoon with sun coming through the window, the amount of reflections jumping off all of the glass made it so distracting, I think almost dangerous to drive. Next up, let's talk about interior resilience, because the owners claim these interiors are quite resilient, and according to this car, it's got nearly 50,000 Ks on it. It's used on a daily basis. Yeah, really good for interior resilience. None of the plastics are scratching too easily. The leather still feels nice and soft and relatively supple, although gloss black plastic in high traffic areas. Why do manufacturers keep doing this? I feel like this is almost a way that you can tell a manufacturer doesn't really care about your long-term ownership prospects of the car, because yeah, this looks fantastic when new, but it gets dirty instantly and it scratches so easily. Also, a bit of a negative with resilience if you're looking at a GLA 45S, these come with an Alcantara steering wheel. Fantastic when they're new, but they feel like a bit of a crusty old wetsuit after a while. This can be rejuvenated, but why go Alcantara? Like, go in Alcantara section here and here where you barely touch it, but these bits just make them leather. And then as far as the overall fit and finish and feel and design in here, I don't know. Look, it is a massive improvement in quality, I think, over the previous generation, because the door handles don't squeak too much and this doesn't move around too much and this doesn't wobble too much. The previous or slightly older Mercs, they can have a few issues like that. But I don't know, I just feel like it looks a bit, I'm gonna say chintzy. It's just all a bit too much gloss plastic and a bit too much chrome and metal everywhere. Just, I don't know, I feel like for a Mercedes, I want it to be classy and sophisticated and cool. And this is nice, but it just, I don't know, just, does it feel a bit cheap to you? However, one thing that certainly doesn't feel cheap are the seats. These are just so comfortable. Obviously in an AMG you can get the bucket style seats, but they can have a polarizing opinion about them. I personally love them, but I know plenty of people that don't like the racing bucket seats. They're just a bit too firm and aggressive for them. But yeah, seating position, loads of adjustability, really nice place to sit, but then again, I don't know, the interior doesn't grab me. Now, as far as using the interior in terms of practicality, you've got a spot perfectly sized for your phone just there with some power outlets, 2 cup holders there. I don't think that divider is removable. No, it's not. You've got Mercedes classic bisexual center console because it goes both ways. You've got okay sized glove box with a little shelf up there. Door bins are a good size, but they're not lined. It's just all hard, scratchy plastic. So if you put, you know, a metal water bottle in there, it's going to rattle around a bit. Nothing there, no spot for sunglasses there. There's no storage under the seats. I think I was expecting more cubby holes and storage than this. I just think for a car that's supposed to be a practical SUV, this kind of isn't. Now, when it comes to what features and equipment and safety tech you're going to get, this being the very top of the range GLA 45S, it is loaded with so much stuff. But just be aware, as you move further down the GLA food chain, unless the original owner has ticked a copious amount of the countless option boxes available, you might be surprised that you could miss out on a bunch of stuff that you will find standard on, let's say, lesser vehicles. For example, let's say radar guided cruise control that is standard on a mid-spec Hyundai Kona is not standard on a mid-spec GLA. It's part of a $1,500 driver assistance package. In the industry, that is called taking the piss, Mercedes. Now look, in their defense, the mid-cycle update did include a few extra features that used to be exclusive to optional equipment packages, but try to find a used example that is loaded with optional extras, because thanks to the used market compressing prices, for maybe $1,000 or $2,000 extra on the used market, you could get a car that is fully equipped. Also, if you'd like all of the common issues with these things written out so it's really easy to refer to, as well as a whole bunch of extra information on the GLA range, go to ReDriven.com and check out the free GLA cheat sheet. If you're in the market for one of these, it is an absolute must read. Now, in the back seat, I'm exactly 20 centimeters taller than another compact and powerful entity with the initials GLA, George Luke Ass. This is in my driving position, and it's okay, I guess. My knees aren't smashing against the back of the front seat. I've got a really good amount of foot room. Windows are a decent sized panoramic roof, means it feels airy and spacious. but the seats are bloody firm, almost hard. Maybe they just need more seats to get a bit more squishy. But yeah, it's a nice enough place to be, I guess. It doesn't feel as premium as I was expecting. Like, there's lots of sort of hard plastics pretty much everywhere. That's sort of soft. This is kind of soft, but not really. I don't know, I think I was expecting more. But as far as features and practicality go, you've got your own air vents there, you've got a little storage space there that's just going to collect filth and dirt and dust. Power outlet here, 2 nets here. You do have door bins, but again, they're scratchy, so if you put a bottle in there, it's going to rattle around all over the place. However, there's no pull-down armrest with cup holders. You've just got this little slide-through section into the boot, so you can say g'day to anyone you've abducted into the back. But I don't know, again, I think I was expecting more stuff. Now, I do know some models, they do have a pull-down armrest and they do have a couple of cup holders, but just not in this one. Now, in the boot, good news here compared to the previous generation. Actual space is more, the load height is lower, the opening aperture is larger, and when you pop the seats down, like so, when this is in its higher position, you can actually drop the boot floor down a level. This is pretty flat, so it's good for sliding things in and out. Practicality boot-wise and space-wise, pretty good. Now, before we get into the driving impressions, one of the big complaints some owners have had is just getting the GLA to drive in the first place. Now, these issues seem to be a bit more common on the GLA 250 and the GLA 35 AMG, but sometimes the transmission can just lock in gear. It means you can't select reverse or park or neutral. Worse still, some cars won't select any gear whatsoever. This basically turns them into quite an expensive GLA-shaped sculpture. Now, unfortunately, this means some owners out there have had to have their cars dragged onto a tow truck because the wheels refuse to rotate. I mean, surely there's a better way, right? And then we have just the transmission's characteristics in general. Plenty of owners, including Bruce that owns this one, and I've noticed it as well, when you're slowing down to, say, pull up at a set of lights or a giveaway sign, the transmission clunks down into its lower gears. Now, some dealerships have basically said this is just an inherent characteristic of the transmission, and you know what? They're kind of right. Dual clutch transmissions are renowned for being a bit clunky at around town speeds. It can be a bit hesitant, can clunk down into gears. It's just one of those things. Now, some of the more recent models have had this clunkiness sort of resolved, but the problem with that is we worry that it might have long-term effects on reliability, because for a dual clutch to be smooth, it means that the clutch packs have to be rubbing against each other more. Now, this can be good for smoothness, but potentially not so great for long-term reliability. Another problem I've noticed and owners mentioned as well is that the auto stop start, it's just a bit violent. Like when it starts again, it's like, oh, we're starting again. It just should be smoother. But the biggest issue you might have, in particular in the GLA 45S, is just keeping your license. Honestly, this thing is so fast. It is so rapid. Look, honestly, unless you are spending most of your time on an autobahn or you enjoy roll racing the other parents at your daycare drop-off, this thing could get you into serious trouble in no time. It builds speed so effortlessly, and it just feels completely bolted to the ground while it's doing it. But as insanely rapid as it is, where's the fun to it? Because, yeah, look, it's great for showing off and scaring your passengers, but that novelty wears off, and then you're just left with a car that, yes, is fast, but it doesn't feel all that engaging. And look, yes, you can set the exhaust to pop and crackle and carry on so your neighbours think you're a complete wanker. And it is relatively refined in here. There are a few weird rattles and squeaks, but overall quite refined. Also, the suspension is really nice, and that's amazing considering that this thing can hammer through roundabouts at ridiculous speeds. But overall, I don't know, I just don't find it that satisfying to drive. At the end of the day, when you're not up it for the rent, it just feels like driving another nice, small, compact SUV. Honestly, no matter what drive mode you're in or how you've got the car set up, I just don't think it feels all that special. And then you've got the concern that, what if mechanically something were to go wrong? What happens then? Well, I can't answer that because I'm not a qualified mechanic. But you know who is? It's Jim.
Look, historically, the biggest killers of this type of car is neglect. The thing is, people who own them don't really know that they are neglecting them. They follow the service intervals. Unfortunately, those service intervals are 20, 25,000 Ks apart, and basically that just spoils the car. If you own one and you're planning on keeping it for the long term, you have to service it at least every 10,000 kilometres. The problem here is most owners have no intention of keeping the car for the long term. They get out of warranty and then they get a new one. So potentially by the time it gets to the second owner, they're already pretty much underserviced and neglected. And the second owners, well, they're the ones that get faced with the potentially very expensive repair bills. And that's part of the reason why these things depreciate so much. The M139, that's the fast one. It is a very highly strung engine. It's got a closed deck block, twin scroll turbo, forged internals, and it's very highly strung. It's pretty much a tuned race engine, to be honest. They are known for oil consumption though, and the turbos, they are working very hard, and unfortunately they can suffer from premature wear. The cooling system on these, very complex. Some owners have complained on track days that they can get a bit hot. Also, the engine mounts in these, they do wear prematurely. Now, on an engine that has this much power, the long service history is just insane, especially on this car. Every 10,000 kilometres, or better still for this one, every 5,000 kilometres. The M260, that's like the detuned little brother. Look, that has less power and is way less temperamental. It does have a few of the same problems as the other one though. They also are prone to timing chain issues, less likely to have a catastrophic failure, but they do tend to rattle, especially on cold starts. They do have some EGR complications, not terribly common. Potentially one of the bigger problems you might see here is, although it's not terribly common, is the exhaust valves and the exhaust valve seats. Basically, they just wear prematurely, they can burn valves, and in some cases that valve can actually break and drop a valve and completely destroy the engine. Worth knowing that in some regions, Mercedes have an extended warranty to cover that, should that happen. But keep in mind that warranty won't be around forever. Now the M282, that's the 1.3 litre turbo. That's actually a Nissan and Renault collaboration. Typical list of Renault issues here, plenty of timing chain complications, but actually more related to the tensioner, it just doesn't tension properly. Oil consumption, no surprises there. Plenty of cooling system complications, the thermostat gets stuck open and the water pump can leak, pretty common problem there. And the comically small turbo can have some issues with wastegate rattle and some boost control complications too. And you can't get parts for it, you've got to replace the whole thing. Look, overall, all of these become significantly more unreliable after 100,000 kilometres. Now, if you're watching this in 4 or 5 years' time and you're tempted to get one because they're cheap, and they will be, my advice is be very, very careful, because you could be buying into a financial and maintenance nightmare.
Now, before we go recommending that you buy a GLA or not, there's something that we at ReDriven really need to remember. It's the fact that because we get to drive so many different cars, things like marketing hype and brand appeal are completely lost on us. We don't care if it's a Mercedes-Benz or a Kia or whatever it is. But the other thing we need to remember is that for many of you, owning a car from a premium brand like Mercedes-Benz, that might be a lifelong aspiration. And when it comes to the GLA, unless it's wearing an AMG badge, we think you should keep aspiring. While many owners may have had faultless experiences, justifying the depreciation, the servicing costs, the expensive parts, and the inconsistent build quality is challenging, to say the least. But if this badge genuinely brings your life value and allows you to ignore all the potential negatives with the car, sure, go on, buy one. We certainly wouldn't, because we think for used GLA money, there are plenty of other cars that are superior in every single way, but at the end of the day, it's your money, right? However, for the AMG models, especially the GLA 45S, well, it potentially could be a different story. Sure, no one needs this level of performance in a small crossover, and the build quality and the reliability and the running costs and the depreciation all remain questionable, to say the least. But plant your right foot and suddenly having a practical SUV that can launch this violently towards the horizon all makes so much sense. That said, a car that's trying to be everything to everybody all the time clearly comes with some compromises. So instead, for the same money that these things ask, why not buy one of these for all your practical SUV needs, and then one of these as well for the fun on the weekends? But I've got a question for you. If your life can only accommodate one car and you need it to do everything that this can do, what would you buy? Would it be a GLA 45S or would it be something else? Let us know in the comments. See you next time. And before you start thinking, oh, geez.